Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode here on BizWestMichigan. I am really excited today. We have another phenomenal guest here. We have Kevin Budelmann from Peopledesign here in Grand Rapids. Kevin is the president and co-founder of Peopledesign. He is also an internationally renowned designer, strategist, and author. The book he co-authored, which is called Brand Identity Essentials, has become pretty much the go-to publication for brand identity professionals and marketers really around the globe. I'm actually a huge fan of the book as well. He is president of APDF, which is the Association for Professional Design Firms. He is a former president and founder of the AIGA chapter here in West Michigan. He was involved with TEDx in Grand Rapids. I could just keep going on and on and on and on. He is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He and Yang, his business partner and wife, and their 3 children live in East Grand Rapids. So, Kevin, before I just keep going on and on, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction.
You're welcome. So, obviously Peopledesign has experienced a little bit of growth over the past few years. You guys are absolutely kicking some pretty major booty and have become really well known. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about Peopledesign, how you guys got started, and what you do?
Sure. The firm was started by my wife and I about 15 years ago, and we moved to this part of the country actually originally for a job at Herman Miller, and a few years after working there started this firm, and in that period of time we've been building a really great team that helps companies innovate through their brands.
Innovation through their brands. That's one of the topics that we're going to definitely talk about. Just so everybody's aware, Kevin and I did try and do this interview a little while ago, and with all the fun and exciting technical issues that I had, we're going to get to do it again. So, just so everybody's aware. So if he and I seem really comfortable together doing this interview, that's why. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how many you guys have? Like 20, 25 people there now, I understand.
Yeah, about 20 people now.
Okay. And when it comes to brand strategy, why don't you give us an overview of kind of what that is?
Sure. A lot of people see branding as a kind of a cosmetic thing, and many companies do treat it that way. And while branding has a cosmetic component, it really has its foundations in business strategy. Mm-hmm. And so we have a process where we start with brand positioning, and we use actually fairly standard business templates to answer basic questions about a business. And what we have found is that the question is a lot easier to ask than they are to answer. So our first work has to do with helping do sort of some primary customer research and trying to uncover unmet needs in a market and try to basically answer basic questions about brand positioning. And then the second part of it has to do with building out brand experiences. And we use a lot of the techniques that are described in our book.
Okay. The whole concept of brand, I think that it's come a long way. Obviously, I don't know if you know it or not, I've been involved with branding and identity for almost 20 years. Immediately everybody just thinks, oh, well, brand is just the logo. It's just the mark. And I disagree. I mean, brand is really everything that the company stands for. It's their messaging, it's their story, it's their colors, it's how they present themselves, it's what they do in their marketplace, what they do in their community. That's all part of brand. So, that's actually one of the reasons I was so excited to talk with you today and get to learn more about you and Peopledesign. So,
I couldn't agree more. And actually, in the introduction of our book, we have an illustration of an iceberg. And really, if you imagine the little peak of snow of the iceberg that's above the waterline is kind of like the logo. The brand, of course, is the much larger part of the iceberg that's underneath, and it's because really a brand is nothing more or less than a perception that a customer has of an entity that's created over time by a series of complex interactions. And understanding those interactions, is the key part of trying to build a brand. Whether you're a startup or a company that's been around for a long time, but the logo is really a symbol of that promise that's made to the customer. I think that the challenge is it's too often used interchangeably with the word brand. I mean, if the brand is the promise, the logo is just a symbol of that promise.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you and I had talked about before is the concept of brand, I think, is going through a pretty major metamorphosis, and then there's the whole concept of how design really fits into brand, and that's really kind of where, to some degree, the logo mark comes into play. But you and I had chatted before about, kind of the things that Target and McDonald's and Starbucks have really done for the concept of not only branding but also design and the appreciation of better design. Why don't we kind of touch on that? And you had some really great stuff to say last time, but I just think that you had said before that with Target, especially with design, people are beginning to understand what good design is.
Absolutely, and I think it's interesting how much the idea of design thinking has become a very popular topic in business schools, and it's really because there are some techniques in creative problem solving that can be very, very effective in terms of way of prototyping an experience and trying to think holistically about a problem, and really brands that you and I know and may respect and admire build products and services that we pay a premium for every day, and it's because they have a better and a more acute sense of the unmet need. They're scratching some itch in the marketplace that people want scratched, and so it's a very critical issue in terms of understanding what are the sources of value, and branding is one way of innovating and trying to better understand what are those sources of value from customers.
Well, and that's one of the things that I always like to talk about is the whole concept of innovation, and the example that I like to give of what I consider innovation. Everybody has this mysterious thing that they think innovation has to be this major breakthrough, and it's this powerful thing, and only these really 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 smart people get to be innovative. But that's really not the case. I mean, the example that I use all the time are the gloves. I mean, everybody has their mobile phone, they've got their smartphone, and they've all got the resistive screens on it. I mean, mine's right here, and we live in West Michigan. It gets really cold, like 9 or 10 months out of the year, and I don't like to have to take off my gloves to work my phone. Well, I was walking through Old Navy, and this drives my kids crazy when I do this, but I was like jumping up and down. I was so excited. They had a pair of really inexpensive gloves that had some material on the forefinger and the thumb of both hands that allowed me to operate my phone without taking off my gloves. That's innovation. So
absolutely. It's such an interesting and powerful idea. Innovation in some respects has already become a cliche in business circles.
Yep.
And certainly people have been innovating, and companies have been innovating for a lot longer than the business press has been talking about innovation. But it is an important concept because the world is changing so rapidly. I mean, between Moore's law and the rapid explosion of computing power,
right,
and the global marketplace. I mean, the situation on the ground, if you will, in terms of what's happening in front of your customers is changing in such radical ways all the time. We think it's really, really important to stay ahead of what are their needs and what are they experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Because really what that is it's the source of new ideas and the source of new innovation. So the gloves, as you mentioned, I mean, that wouldn't exist if mobile computing and smartphones haven't dominated the marketplace. But if you're a glove maker and if you ignore that fact, and if you think that people are buying gloves today the way they've always bought gloves, you'll miss an opportunity. And so really, the players in any marketplace who are going to succeed over the long haul will have a much more acute sense of where the customers are and what the brand should mean in their minds. And are they a player that's going to meet the needs of yesterday, of today, or even into the future? And so much more about our work. We sometimes talk about the idea of future-proofing brands. But it has to do with really trying to understand in a more deep sense what the meaning of the brand actually is. And so it often has less to do with the physical attributes of a product or a service and more to do with what is the sort of emotional or sort of more abstract needs being met that your brand is meeting. And what that allows you to do is to move into lots of new categories that you might not have been in the past. And so you may not have even been a glove maker, but you can imagine somebody who sells mobile phones selling gloves because they work with mobile phones.
Well, it's no different than Google buying Motorola. I mean, when Google started, mobile search didn't exist. Now it does. So they actually bought a hardware manufacturer to make the phones for their operating system so that they can power their search engine. I mean, that's Perfect example. I mean, another example of innovation that really wasn't earth-shattering was Herman Miller with the Aeron chair. I mean, if you look at what they've done, or what Steelcase has done with workspace environments, and there's only so much you can do with that, but they continue to innovate and come up with really cool new ideas. I mean, think about the Aeron chair when it first came out. I mean, it was so much different than any of the other chairs that were out there, to the point that it became kind of an icon, both positive and negative in some cases, but of the time. And then you look at how that's evolved, and then there's so many. I mean, you can just go on and on and on, and it doesn't have to be just technology products. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, and you guys have the advantage, and I get to have the advantage because I get to talk to different people, in that bringing an outside perspective to your clients, or to the marketplace, because you might be able to be working with one client in one industry that is completely disconnected, but you get to take a little bit of that information and apply it to something over here, and that can be the difference between electricity and living in the dark.
That's absolutely true. I mean, one of the wonderful opportunities we have is the ability to kind of cross-pollinate on some level, and being able to sort of understand what happens in one marketplace can certainly affect another.
Mm-hmm.
So much of it is rooted in, we believe in our perspective, and the reason the name of our company is Peopledesign, is that we're focused so much on sort of user needs. I think ultimately those are things that never really go away. The fundamentals of what a company is actually providing to their core constituents is something that will persist beyond technologies, and the technologies will change, and the products and services that allow are really just platforms as a way of delivering that value to a customer. What's interesting is that, and you mentioned Herman Miller and the office furniture industry, which is really why we're here in West Michigan in the first place originally. And that industry, like many industries that we work within, you can in the past. I mean, there's often only maybe half a dozen key innovations that have really created the industry in the first place. And the contract furniture industry, I mean, was sort of based on the idea of systems furniture and selling it in that way, and then moving into ergonomic seating, and then ever more ergonomic seating with different generations of chairs. The reality, though, of course, is that the reason why innovation has become such a hot topic for a lot of business people is that your hit rate for innovation successes has to increase. You can't just have a key innovation once a decade. It used to be once a decade, and then it was once every 5 years, and then it's once every 3 years. And now, of course, we all witness Google and Apple and all of these players in Silicon Valley, and they are producing new products and services in a very, very rapid-fire fashion. Now, not every company needs to necessarily have the same rate of innovation, but they certainly have to increase their hit rate. Right. And so even if you're a glove manufacturer, you might miss the bus if you don't keep up.
and that's the whole thing. Is, I mean, I look at West Michigan and our state as a whole, and it's been, and it still is, so heavily manufacturing based. But the companies that are doing well are the ones that, again, and the innovation can be just a slight tweak that can either open the product up to another market, can make the existing product better for the existing market, and that's really where the concept of brand and how you're perceived, and the messaging and the design and everything else, that can translate all the way from the product through to the logo and everything in between. And that's where it's fun to see it, because as people continue to understand it better and get to know it, then they see what they can actually do with it, and it's, to me, that's exciting.
I find it very exciting. It's fun to talk to companies and in some respects help them understand what are the real sources of value, and how sometimes I think that makers of products, manufacturers, sometimes get too fixated in some respects on the hardware aspect, when in fact even though that's what the customers are buying, what they really get, of course, is some other intangible benefit. So the question in the brand building opportunity, we believe, is trying to understand what is that less tangible benefit, in building a platform. A brand is a kind of platform, and is a way, is kind of a stage to start innovating. And I think what we have found, and there are so many examples of this in the marketplace, is that some of the best innovations for a product company is to move and be somewhat more like a service company. and for service companies to be more like product companies. I mean, we're all familiar increasingly with software as service, and that's a great example where these products are becoming more like services.
Right.
And this is true. And it's really just a matter of trying to understand if the market is going to zig, how are you going to zag?
Well, and the flip side of that too is that the companies that are going to innovate or that are going to look at adjacent markets to see, or even adjacent services that they can either offer or partner with, and everything else. I mean, the example of software as a service is a great example. That all of a sudden, because of the internet, because of the speeds of data transfer, you don't have to have these CDs. Well, if you don't have to have the CDs, then you don't have to have all the other pieces. And you look at companies like Staples and Office Max, and locally you look at companies like Gazelle that are adapting to that because they can actually kind of address the issues on the fly. And one of the things that I think really stands out are the companies that have a defined, what I call a USP, a unique selling proposition or a unique service proposition. When they identify that, what is going to make us different than our competitors, then they can really expand both on the innovation track, on the branding track, on communication and everything. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, especially with you guys. I mean, as you get into that, I mean, I know that's a big part of what, where you start with your clients is what's different.
Absolutely. I mean, to answering these basic questions, we believe there's kind of a fairly straightforward formula for brand positioning. And we use a template from Harvard Business School, but I mean the one from Kellogg and other places is very similar. But it's basic questions about what category are you in, what claim are you making, how are you going to support that claim. These are, again, the questions are easy to identify, but they're often very, very difficult answers to come up with. Particularly if you're in an industry that has had a lot of sort of long-standing status quo as to however if something has happened. So very often, that's why the first part of our work is often research, because we're trying to understand what is the nature of the category they're actually in. And as we witness all the time these days, especially in the technology segment, but it's not just the guys in Silicon Valley. Just think about cable TV,
right,
where things are going. There's a ton of category overlap and new categories being formed, categories that are being formed between categories, and so understanding what is the nature of the playing field, and truly what's the nature of the customer problem that you're trying to solve, and then you reconcile that obviously with your capabilities. Or if you're a manufacturer, what kind of manufacturing capabilities do you have? You can't assume that whatever it is you've made for the last 30 years that people are going to continue to buy. So it's really critical to start thinking more analytically about what is the nature of the market need, and how can you meet a potential future market need, which is really about being sustainable, creating a sustainable business.
Well, the sustainability part is a huge deal. I mean, you look at a lot of people don't understand everything that's really going on from a sustainability basis here in West Michigan. But you've got everybody from the guys at Steelcase with Peter Wegge, who is a huge activist in that space, to Cascade Engineering, to some of the stuff that Amway is doing, and Herman Miller is huge into that space as well with using recycled products and everything else. And the concept of sustainability, part of it's being green, which nobody's in favor of greenwashing at this point.
Sure.
But it's just making it so that the sustainable business practice it's longevity of the business. And perfect example of that is I don't know if you know Guy Bazzani from Bazzani Associates. I've gotten to know Guy a couple different times, and the things that he's doing now, both from an environmental standpoint, but also a sustainability standpoint. He's using local materials, he's using local contractors. I got to interview him at the Bali conference. There was a thing here not too long ago, which was the Business and Local Living Economies Conference. Pretty big deal for it. I mean, it's usually been held in San Francisco and on the East Coast. They had it in Grand Rapids this year. It was a really big deal. Local First actually put that together. But hearing the people talk of what they were doing was remarkable. And Guy Bazzani is like way out in front for that space and really promoting that. So kind of a little shout out here for Guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are a lot of really amazing, talented people here in West Michigan. And I think that sometimes it's a matter of trying to better understand, what the real value is there, and try to, find that talent and try to amplify it as much as possible, and use it as a template for other parts of the country, or just help spotlight what's happening here locally.
Yep, absolutely. So, one of the things that, I always ask the two questions for the people that get to come on the show. The first one is you guys have been really successful. Is there anything that you can connect, other than everything that you just told us about, how have you gotten to where you guys have gotten? Is it just, is there a simple formula that you can share, or is it a competitive secret?
That's a good question. I guess I feel like I'm kind of a lifelong student, and I have little kids now, and it's become more and more clear to me as I've been plodding my way through our business, just trying to understand how to adapt to the changing conditions of the marketplace and of the world. And the design industry is very different now than it was 20 years ago when I came out of college. So part of it is just kind of a necessity, but it also becomes kind of a source of energy. It actually becomes a lot of fun to think about how the world is changing and how to continue to add value. And in some respects, the more we've thought about it for ourselves, the more helpful we are to our customers. I actually feel that in some respects, the fact that we're a small entrepreneurial company, and the fact that I wear hats as a salesperson and as a marketing person, and I have payroll and I have to keep the lights on, it actually makes me a better advisor to my clients, because CEOs of much larger companies with the same kinds of issues, but just a few more zeros after their sales. It's really the same issues. So fundamentally they're not that different. It's just that it's operating at a different scale, and so it becomes a symbiotic and kind of fun experience. And so those are definitely something that's been helpful for me as we move forward.
I would agree that the flexibility and embracing change, being able to embrace it, is a big deal. So here's the kicker. Always ask that question first. Now we go to the other one where people kind of start to squirm. If you could go back and change one thing, or if you look at one mistake that you've made that you could go back and do differently in your business, what would it be?
I think the easy thing to say is that when we started, I thought of myself as a designer, and you imagine yourself as being kind of the center of a creative process, and sort of the one genius who's going to help every client. And I think what happens is that very quickly you realize that you're not necessarily the smartest person in the room, and that people with very, very different kinds of backgrounds add a lot of value. So initially, when we got busy, we just hired people that looked a lot like us. No, not physically, but just had the same kind of profile, a resume, same kind of educational background. Nowadays, we're increasingly looking for people who are more and more divergent. So we have, I have people on our staff who are, I have a poet, and we have programmers, and we have writers, and we have 2 MBAs, and we have designers, and so people with wildly different backgrounds. And increasingly, we're really thinking about how to fill in holes. So what don't we know about, and what can we represent better? Because so much of the innovation happens between existing disciplines, and so having a kind of strategy that allows you to straddle between disciplines is a very, very effective way of innovating. So if I had anything to do over again, I would immediately have hired people that are very, very different than me, than hiring people that were just like me out of the gate.
That is an amazing answer. And I've, when I've run the companies that I've run and done the stuff that I've done, you always kind of gravitate, and you want to, find people that are like you. It's very hard to go out and find people. You're not attracted to people that aren't like you, because they're different, and that's scary, especially from a human nature standpoint. So
it's true. It's actually the other half of the equation as to why we're called People Design, because so much of what I've realized is that kind of true collaboration is difficult but incredibly rewarding and powerful.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, I got to tell you, I've absolutely loved chatting with you both times. Really enjoyed it, and you guys have a really great company. West Michigan's really lucky to have you guys here, and continue to watch you. Look forward to continue watching you guys grow.
Well, thank you very much. It was an interesting interview. Good luck in the future.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll talk with you soon. Thanks, everybody.